Welcome to David and David on Real Estate. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the real estate market.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the David on Real Estate, and a happy new year to everybody. Wishing everybody a very prosperous and a very amazing 2022. And today is a great day because we are on podcast number 26.
Yeah, happy New Year's, everybody. And I'm still in the festive mood. I'm wearing my festive New Year's shirt today. And we've talked about mentors before and role models. To me, it's this guy, Chevy Chase. I've learned so much from Chevy, how to be a father, how not to be a father. Anyways, he's one of my all-time favorite comedians. My kids refer to me as Clark Griswold affectionately all the time from the vacation movies, because I tend to do some of the things that Chevy did to get his family together and to enjoy stuff the way Chevy did in those movies. So he's Clark Griswold to me, and he's one of my heroes. And we always talk about mentors. Nobody has done it more for me than this guy.
Dave, does your house look like their house did back in the day?
No. And no family truckster, although we had a family truckster when my kids were younger. We had some vacations just like them, and it was anyways, we still enjoy watching those movies, and my kids poke fun of me as being Clark Griswold, and I wear it proudly. I wear it very proudly.
You know, it's funny, the memories we have from growing up, and you always remember those, those irregular family stories, those irregular vacations, right? Where things weren't perfect, but you guys were together,
right?
And that's what mattered the most, right?
Right. And it's the misadventures that you remember more than when everything goes as planned. Like we had a couple drives down to Florida, with 3 kids loaded up in the van, and and all the fighting that goes on, and and there was one scene in the vacation where they say, what's that smell that from the back seat, and we've experienced, take a wrong turn, you go off the track, something happens, that's the stuff you remember the most, not when everything goes as planned. So it's in spite of our best efforts to keep things going smoothly. And it's no different in the business world too. We plan, and there's always something that comes up that's unexpected and throws us a curve. And that's the stuff that becomes memorable, and how we react to that and how we deal with that. That's what makes or breaks us as business owners and leaders of groups and things like that, right?
Absolutely. And if business has taught me anything, it's taught me that whatever life throws at you, you have the resources and ability to persevere, get through, and become stronger on the other side. Like, the world has infinite amount of resources. As a business person, you just have to tap into the right network and ask for help and look in the right places and work hard, and you will get through anything.
Right. And you have to accept the idea that you don't have all the answers, and that you could be wrong with what your initial reaction would be. And so you have to be open to getting help, to to finding the right answers, to doing research, and to one of the hardest things to accept is that you might be wrong. Like you're a really bright guy, David, and and most of the stuff that you do, is well thought out and everything. But occasionally you could be wrong, and you have to be open to that idea that somebody else might know something or have more information than you do. And I think that's a real valuable lesson, and to take input from other people. And and I always try and be very open to that in our law firm, whether it's from other lawyers, from clerks, from information from clients, for feedback I get from you, and other brokers and agents and things like it all. I'm open to all of that stuff. There's always a way to improve. There's always a way to get through a situation, because you don't always have the answer. So the smart thing is to know that you don't always have the answers, but you can know where you can try and get them or try and figure it out.
Well,
don't pretend you know it when you don't know it.
That was Einstein's really big thing, is he said to, I can't remember, I don't remember the context. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he basically said, listen, I don't know what the answer is, but I know exactly where to find it. And that is more powerful than, having an encyclopedia in your head. And he's absolutely right, because it's the street smart ability to solve those complex problems by knowing who to ask, where to look, and how to navigate. And you're not going to do it if you put your hands up and say, okay, I can't do this, this can't be done. It starts from a belief. You have to know that, whatever problems 2022 is going to throw at you, okay, we're going to solve them together.
Right. And, and you have your regular business issues that come up as you're an expanding business, like you are, like we are at our firm. So you can't do the things the same way you did when you were a smaller brokerage. We can't do some things the same way we did when we were a smaller law firm with less lawyers, less clerks. We have to adapt. We have to keep evolving, and we don't have all the answers. And we got to keep changing. We got to be open to ideas of how we do that. How technology's changing all the time. Like, we got brand new systems coming in that we started using now that you wouldn't recognize the way we close transactions now from a couple of years ago. It's like it's night and day. The technology has changed, and some of it was driven by COVID, right?
And actually, David, I wanted to talk to you about that. It's probably an off-air conversation, but I'm going to mention it on there because I know the kind of relationship we have with your law firm. But I know that on your transaction software, there's a way to integrate it with our backend, right? And that's something that we're looking at and we're exploring our side. So I mean, it'd be great to work together and to get that system that talks and work and works seamlessly. Because the whole goal here is to make sure that our client experience, which is our mutual client experience, is the best that it can be.
Right. And those systems are all happening. The technology's there, and it's all being done in a secure fashion too. And that our system will be able to speak to your system more directly. You can send us a commission statement instead of emailing it to us. You just upload it into a system that we access and you access, and we get it, and it's still secure, and there's still checks and balances and things like that. But that's all available. It's just a matter of us tweaking it and getting used to the systems and implementing it now. And it's great. We've got brand new technology that we're using now for all our client meetings, which came out of having Zoom meetings and virtual meetings and stuff. But now we can do it. Nobody has to download software. They just click on a link, and we can have a video conference with them, and they can get the documents instantly there, and they can sign digitally, virtually. And they don't have to print out documents anymore and then sign them and then send them back to us. And it's secure. And as soon as we finish the meeting, they get a copy instantly now, and it's there. And we get a copy of the signed documents instantly. Like, tremendous advances. And I think this was all pushed ahead because of COVID. I think it's all available to us now. Maybe we wouldn't have had this if we hadn't had COVID and sort of been forced into, advancing these systems faster, right? And then once you have it, like, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. We're not going back, right?
No, you always want to keep moving forward. But no, I absolutely agree with you. I think adversity, instills innovation, right? Because, like, when you look at how you're doing business now versus how you did business 2 years ago, you look back and you're like, how do we ever survive? With all this paper and, face-to-face meetings, and, a client has to take time off work, come drive down to the office. And, now everything is so seamless and so easy. And, you can spend more time on the things that are really important. Like, if a client has a question about something really important about the document, now you have more time to spend with the client and explain that to them versus on the administrative side of closing the transaction.
Yeah. And it really helps. And, and then the meetings can be recorded, just like this is being recorded. There's, the discussions that we had, the explanations, it's all being recorded. It can be used again. There's so many advantages to it. And, we just got to keep looking for the next advance in technology. You look at your industry. How would you guys have been the last 2 years during COVID if there was no such thing as a DocuSign type of system, and you had to physically get together with your buyers and your sellers to sign the agreements, purchase and sell, and initial all the changes and all the back and forth? If that hadn't, you were lucky that was already in place in your industry before
I
COVID.
think we were both lucky, right? Because without our industry, I mean, there would be no deal, right? And I can guarantee you, David, that, and I mean, we were close. Remember when the government first announced its essential business list?
Yep.
Quebec, for a
Yep.
period of 24 hours, announced that real estate is not essential, right?
Yep.
And then they quickly backtracked, right?
Yep.
If we did not have the Electronic Signatures Act, and we did not have DocuSign, I think there would be a strong argument that we would not be classified as essential, because the risk would be
Right.
just far too great.
The risk would have been too great, because you have to get the parties together to sign initial, to negotiate. I agree with you. So I think we got lucky there. You know, my industry wasn't like that. We still, in those days, we still had to physically get together and sign paper. But that quickly evolved, and the government stepped in quickly and said, because the missing piece of our puzzle for doing it was swearing a document, an affidavit or a declaration, which needed an in-person meeting. You couldn't do it through Zoom or a video conference. And then they passed legislation pretty quickly to allow that to happen. You know, certain things, you know, had to be in place, but you could do that. So all of a sudden, we now could do virtual meetings. You know, who knows how long it would have taken for the government to pass that if we didn't have COVID, right? And, you know, yeah, it's a good thing. Make sure it's done properly, make sure it's done securely, and, you know, respect privacy laws, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, there's ways to do that. And it's the technology.
It's working really well.
Oh, it's worked beautifully. You know, I don't think we've had one transaction in 2 years that was really, it had to be extended purely for COVID reasons. You know, not, it's never because the documents weren't ready or the parties weren't ready for that. You know, we had all these COVID clauses that everybody was scrambling to get 2 years ago, you know, in case things got shut down, or rights of parties to extend. We never implement those clauses. You know, it was great to do them initially, to put them in, and people are still putting them in, but we never use them. So that's pretty damn good. You know, 2 years later, that we've been able to just continue on and at least have a real estate market, a thriving real estate market in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and David, I wanted to get into it. I wanted to give you guys a market update, because really what's happening out there is absolutely unprecedented. And I wanted to share two stories with you guys. Okay. The first story is kind of a funny story. I have a really good friend of mine that's a real estate investor, and he focuses on a geographic area, and he always religiously looks at realtor.ca to see, you know, what's listing, what's being sold, and just does his market research. So he calls me yesterday and he says, David, is realtor.ca down? And I said to him, realtor.ca down? No, as far as I know, the website is up. Why are you asking me? He's like, well, because between you know, Mavis and Eglinton and all the way to 10th line, north of the 403, there's not even one house listed for sale. So he's like, I went to realtor.ca and I looked at the map, and then I closed my browser and I opened up a new browser and I went back to realtor.ca because I thought it was broken. And that is the story of our supply and record low inventory levels of what we're experiencing. There are no listings on the market. One of my realtors booked an appointment to show a property in Barrie, 2,100 square foot house, 4-bedroom, unfinished basement. The house was built probably in the mid 80s. Nothing special, cookie cutter subdivision home. It was an estate sale. It was listed at $740,000 5 days before New Year's. In the 5 days preceding New Year's, they had over 100 showings.
Wow.
And on January 2nd, they received 46 registered offers on the property.
That's unbelievable. Look at the amount of time you got to take to go through that.
Well, and that's just it. This is my next point. In the 14 years that I've been practicing real estate, I have never seen a realtor send a message to everybody that showed property saying, please don't send us any more offers.
Wow.
We're not looking at any more offers. Like, I mean, that the idea of a realtor saying that they don't want any more offers is pretty absurd, right? Because I mean, everyone wants to act in the best interest of the seller. You want to create maximum level of hype and competition to get the maximum amount of money for your seller. And
Yeah.
for a realtor to actually say, please do not send us any more offers. We have 46 offers. We don't know what to do with these offers. Just really goes to speak to what is really happening in the market, the type of demand, the amount of buyers looking, the shortage of opportunities and listings out there. And you know what? Everybody's feeling frustrated. I'm getting constant calls from realtors, feeling frustrated, putting in 2 offers a day, missing out, losing, to a stronger offer. And it's really difficult out there.
No, it is. It puts a lot of pressure on the agents. It puts pressure on us too. Like we feel it with status certificate reviews,
Right.
On condos that have multi offers and reviewing the status in advance of making an offer. And the agents know, well, we're going in, we know there's 8 other offers, 10 other offers. We need to review this, can you review this in the next hour or 2 hours? We got to go put in a clean offer tonight. And, we scramble to do it. And then of course, they say, how come you charged us so much for reviewing this in a rush and stopping your day and spending 2 hours on a rush to review this? We didn't get the deal. And, well, but we have to get paid too. It's a lot of time, as to go through a status certificate. And that's hard for them too, because then they're moving on to the next condo and they might lose that one and then the third one. And sometimes it's 4 or 5 before they hit on one, right? Some decide to go out of the market for a while and sit on it till they come back. It puts a lot of pressure on everybody. We just need that supply to get out there. And unfortunately, it's early January. And in a typical year with no COVID, no nothing, January is generally slow. There's hardly anything on the market, usually in January, and it starts to ramp up as you get into February a little more in March, and then you have a spring market. So hopefully the same thing happens this year.
Well, from what I'm seeing, David, I'm predicting, a crazy 2022, and with these shutdowns and the fragility of our economy, a lot of people thought that they're going to raise rates at some point this year. And, I think more and more when you look at the context of our economy and what's happening, I think there's going to be a larger and larger argument that their hands are going to be tied and they're not going to be able to raise rates in this environment, right? Which is going to, again, translate to double-digit increases in prices in our real estate market.
Yeah, and the only thing that's really going to bring down pricing is there to be a lot of supply to come on, right? So, rates, they might move up, but I think I agree with you. It's probably going to be marginal, like really slow, slow trickle up, of it, and not a dramatic increase. I think there's still, because of these, lockdowns and slowdowns, whatever you want to call it again, there's pressure on the government to not kill the economy and do what you can to keep it going. And one of the things that's been driving the economy that has been able to function is the real estate industry.
Well,
imagine if we were in the restaurant business and doing these podcasts.
That would be an interesting conversation. I mean, my heart goes out to all small business owners are affected by our current situation. I mean, I can't imagine how tough it must be on everybody, and what people are feeling out there. So if you're one of the people that's affected by what's going on, you have my sincere sympathies, because nothing's harder in the world than not knowing what the state of your business is going to be like tomorrow.
Yeah. And while things were a little more open, my wife Marla and I used the opportunity to get out to a few restaurants and meet with some friends at some restaurants. And originally it was outdoors in areas that were created, which was fabulous. I love eating outside, and eventually we even had a couple indoor restaurant experiences, which was all great. But we talked to, we're going back to restaurants that we know, and we've been there before, and we know the owners, and we've had discussions with them and the staff, and some of them, like, they created these great outdoor spaces that you got to keep this permanent. Like, this is great. It's great to come here in the for the 6 months that you can and sit outside. It's great. He said, I would, but I can't get staff. And we heard the same thing from everybody. They don't have enough staff to service wherever it is. So some that had outdoors, they moved everything indoors because they couldn't do both. They didn't have staff to deal with both indoor and outdoor. And then when they moved back indoors to their regular space, they couldn't open up the full restaurant because they couldn't get staff. So many of their staff, you can't blame them, but they bailed because they weren't getting paid, right? They got to find another industry. So that whole industry is really struggling. You know, it's tough enough to be an owner, and then the owners, when they want to be open, they can't get people to work.
Yeah, because they rely heavily on tips to subsidize their wages, right?
Yeah.
That's a real problem, you know.
And you want some steady work, not like, okay, this week you were allowed to be open, next week Doug Ford says no, and now we're closed again. I'm back sitting at home earning zero money. And, you know, so they hang around for a while, and eventually they say, okay, I got to go find another industry to work in.
That pays more steady. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in the era of the great resignation, David. And I mean, we see it all the time. You know, workers are expecting more benefits, more flexibility, more pay, right? And a different way of doing business. You know, we're in the era of Amazon, where anybody can start their own business from home and earn passive income and subsidize their earnings. And, you know, it's hard for conventional businesses to compete unless, you know, you change your business as well, right? Like we talked about pricing, we talked about, you know, value adding, we talked about customer service. You have to be at the top of your game in order to survive in this industry, because you can't charge or discount your services and pay your staff really well.
Right.
You know, you just
Right.
can't do it.
Right.
Right? It all comes a full 360, right? So, you know, and you know, just like agents are calling and asking why you're charging to review status certificates, you're doing it so that you have the staff on hand to be able to provide that level of service. And you know what? We all have to start working more together and understand each other's businesses. And I feel like with realtors, there's a big disconnect understanding what the costs are of running an actual business, right? Which is one of the things that we really try to teach our new realtors at Sutton Summit is what, you know, running a business is not everything is about revenue, right? There's expenses in running a business too. And, you know, it's easy to spend money and have big revenue numbers, but it's what you take home at the end of the year that ultimately matters the most.
Right.
Right. And when you're
Right.
running a really successful business, you have to focus on your expenses, right? You have to focus on your revenue, right? But most importantly, you have to charge enough so that you can pay your employees enough so you can deliver that exceptional customer service.
Right.
And it's not cheap these days.
Right. And you have to provide a proper level of service. A status certificate, just to get back, it takes a long time to review a status certificate properly.
Like those documents are, you know,
an hour or 2 hours, like minimum, depending on the project. Sometimes you might be familiar with the building or something. You may have done one recently, so maybe it's going to take you less time, but it takes a long time. There's a lot of documents. There's a lot of issues to go through. And then we provide a summary for it. And a lot of times we, as a lawyer, sometimes the lawyer on the file will spend more time reviewing a status certificate than on the closing process. You know, there's issues that come up, and that takes time, and it takes time to do it properly. And I do know for a fact that there are some lawyers out there that aren't charging for that. And guess how much time they're spending on reviewing the status certificate and how thorough a job they're doing, right? So, you know, it's the old adage, you get what you pay for. And I can tell you something else, David. In the last 2 weeks, I had a couple agreements that came in unconditional, condo deals, no status certificate condition, and there was no review of a status certificate, okay, in advance. Firm deals. And because the agents said, you know what, competitive market, you know, we don't have a chance to review status, we're not going to do it. Let's just, if we want this property, we got to go in without looking at a status certificate. And then we still have to order one because buyer still needs to know what's in it. We have to know what issues there are. The lender's not going to lend without a status certificate, knowing what the issues are. The title insurer is not going to insure it. We still have to review it. So we still have to get it. We still have to review it. So, and now when we do review, we find issues, we can't go back on the seller for it. It's the buyers bought those issues. And we've had issues on one of these fellows where they may not get their loan because there's issues in the building, and now their lender doesn't want to lend, and the title insurance companies don't want to insure. And so I know you're telling your agents, I certainly tell you when I meet, like, never do that. Don't ever do that. You just can't.
And David, it's so easy in this market, right? Because you really want to get that deal. You've went through 10 offers and you lost 10 offers. And, if I just submit an offer without a condition, maybe I'll get it this time.
Right.
Don't fall in that trap, guys.
Right.
And you know what? We recorded some amazing podcasts. We recorded one on condominium status certificates where we talked at length about all the processes, what to do, how to safeguard your clients. Highly, highly, highly recommend you guys go back to that podcast. And the other one that comes to mind, David, is how to deal with multiple offers in this market, right?
Yeah.
Which was like another phenomenal podcast that we recorded.
Yeah, you gave some great tips, advice on that one. I thought it was brilliant. Like, I learned a lot of stuff from it. I thought it was great strategies, and I encourage everybody to go back and listen to that one.
Yeah,
really
I had a call just before we jumped on this podcast today from one of our realtors, and she asked me if she can take a personal check for her client an offer presentation. And I said to her, well, if that client changes their mind, can they call the bank and put a stop payment on that personal check? And she said, well, of course. And I said, well, why would you ask any seller to accept that then? How is that different than not delivering a check? Right? So she got it very quickly and was very thankful for the advice. And I explained to her, I said, look, you have to sit in front of the sellers or somehow get in front of the sellers and sell the benefit of having that deposit check in hand along with your offer presentation.
Yeah.
Because there's huge benefits to doing that, right? And that's just a small trick to getting ahead and then standing out, and if there's 46 offers on the table. But David, we're running short on time, and we have an amazing topic for today. We wanted to talk about the pitfalls of the agreement of purchase and sale.
Yeah, you know what? It's early in a new year, and it's a good time in your business and my business, and I'm sure other businesses too, as you sort of take stock of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so we thought it'd be a good time to just review some of the things, just like we were talking about, like status certificates, pitfalls and things where people get themselves in trouble as agents and as buyers and as sellers. And just some stuff, it's almost common sense, some of it, but there's things that you have to remind yourself. And it's just good for anybody to do a refresher once in a while. And the beginning of a year is a good time when you're not as busy with other things, and just get your, it's best practices, principles. Just make sure you're practicing properly, right? Maybe make sure you're doing these things. So we thought it'd be a good thing to do it. And it starts in your business, my business, with knowing your client. Like, you have to know your client, who they are, what they're about, what's this transaction? Are they buying a property? Is it an investment property? Is it more than one person buying it? Are they husband and wife? Are they going to be buying it as joint tenants, as tenants in common? What's the difference? You got to make sure you understand these things. If you're on the selling side, who's selling it? Who's the proper party to put on an agreement of purchase sale as the seller? How do you deal with a power of attorney for someone? How do you reflect that in your documents on an agreement of purchase and sale? Is it being sold by an estate? Did one of the parties pass away? I think I gave you that story a little while ago on one of our podcasts, where we were right up to closing, and there's 3 people that were sellers, and no one told us that one of them had died 6 months before that. That would have been useful information for us to know, right? And the agent knew about it. No one told the lawyers. Oh yeah, there's 3 people. One of them died 6 months ago, and we find that out like just before closing. So it's important to know that. You have to know your clients. You have to know their situation. As an agent, you have to know their financial condition. Are they applying for a mortgage? Can they get a mortgage if they're buying? Are they using a mortgage broker? What information can you as an agent help them with to make sure that they get pre-approval for their financing? And we've discussed that in previous podcasts. What is pre-approval? Make sure it's real. And we talked about that when we had the Elan Weintraub on. The different levels of what's a real mortgage approval and what is, yeah, here's a mortgage approval, but it's subject to 20 conditions. And some of them may never meet. So how good is that pre-approval, right? So there's a lot of value you can add as an agent by doing your homework and going the extra step for that thing. And if you're on the sales side and they want to sell a property, what do they have that's encumberancing that property? They have a mortgage, they got a line of credit, do they owe money to the CRA? Is there outstanding property tax bills and water bills? Because at the end of the day, if you do the math, there may not be enough money to pay everybody to close the transaction, right? So you as a seller's agent should be figuring that out and looking into that.
And by the way, the listing brokerage is responsible for the listing commission if there's a shortfall, right? So, our office policy is that we have a mortgage verification document that we get the seller to fill out and sign. Yeah. And in case they don't have all their mortgage information on file, we send that mortgage form to their bank. And we ask the bank to fill it out and fill in those details because we want to make sure there's adequate funds, and that protects the buyer agent, right, on the transaction as well.
Right, and we run into those transactions where we're going to close and it's borderline whether there's going to be enough money to pay everybody, and then if and then who's not going to get paid, and are there other funds? We close sale transactions where we literally are waiting for the seller to deliver us a check, certified funds, because we need that money in order to pay everybody on closing. So those get pretty complicated sometimes because it's the mortgage has to be, the line of credit to get paid, property tax to get paid, the utility bill has to get paid, balance of commissions have to get paid, the legal fees have to get paid, and it turns out CRA's owed money and they can trump everybody. Yeah. Right.
And a lot of the times, negotiations happen the 11th hour by the seller trying to negotiate some of these amounts down so he can close, which kind of adds more fuel to the fire because then there's delays. And a lot of the times people who are in a lot of debt, there's penalties for not closing on time. And, sometimes if a mortgage renews automatically, there's renewal fees and mortgage renewal fees, and they can get extremely expensive.
Well, one of the big ones that we see that's a deal killer sometimes is prepayment penalties on a mortgage.
Yeah.
Okay, because it wasn't anticipated and just wasn't thought of. Oh yeah, I'm sure I'll have a penalty, but how much could it possibly be? And it turns out to be tens of thousands of dollars sometimes, depending on the mortgage that they had. And sometimes nobody brought it to the seller's attention that that's a possibility, and all of a sudden there isn't enough money because you've got these huge prepayment penalties to pay.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's a tip for somebody who has a fixed mortgage that's looking to sell their house. A lot of the times they'll have prepayment abilities, right? They can prepay 15% or 10% or 20% of their mortgage in a given year. If you know you're going to be paying like a massive mortgage penalty for discharging your mortgage, I would prepay that mortgage as much as possible to bring down that penalty as much as possible, literally before closing. Right. So if you have an unsecured line of credit, or if you have some funds, or you can borrow some funds, pay down that mortgage 15%, because that literally decreases your penalty by 15% as well.
Right.
And when you're talking about, a $40,000 penalty, 15% is $6,000. That's an easy thing to do to save $6,000 of fees.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip and great advice. And a lot of our clients do take advantage of that. But, we always have to remind ourselves, like, you're in the business, I'm in the business. The clients don't know this, right? They're only doing so many transactions a year. They may have had that mortgage, for who knows how many years, and they never even thought of it, right? So somebody has to tell them about this. So, it's usually someone in your position, the real estate agent, way before it becomes to the lawyer. Sometimes it's, we don't get involved till the agreement's already signed and we're working towards a closing. And now we get a mortgage discharge statement that shows a penalty of $15,000 that the seller had no idea was coming, right? So they're going to go back to the agent who is doing all the math and say, oh, you should sell this property. This is how much you're going to get. And this is after commissions, you're going to walk away with this, and then you're going to put that in your next property. Well, how come you didn't let us know that there's this prepayment penalty, right? So that comes
They
back
should. Like
at your
honestly,
at
they
your
should.
agents more than it's not the lawyer's issue usually.
Yeah, I mean, they should. I mean, listen, we're professionals and we need to have these tough conversations with our clients. And, yes, it's easy to, again, focus on the transaction. I want to get a listing, I want to get a sale, right?
Right.
But you need to sit down with the seller and you need to go through, these conversations, because nothing worse than, at the end of the day, getting that discharge statement. And some of these penalties could be high. Like, David, what's the highest discharge penalty that you've seen on a residential transaction?
In the $50,000 range.
$50,000 for a mortgage penalty.
Right.
Now,
So-
imagine if you're selling your house and the bank knocks on your door at the end and says, "Oh, you already have a firm agreement to sell? Oh, that's great. Let us get this 200-page contract out and we'll start calculating." And they come back to you say to you that you have a $50,000 penalty. Like, I mean, I would be extremely upset as a seller.
Right. And and how about this as an agent? Okay. Just like you've pointed out, they've got a prepayment right in their mortgage. They get paid down 15%, once every 12 months, something like that. Right. So when is that 12-month date? So maybe it's January 31st.
That's a good point.
You know what? We don't want to sell your property right now. Between now and January 31st, you're going to make a 15% payment. Now we're getting to February, you can make another 15% payment. So we want to close after that payment. So we're going to close in February, late February, March or something instead of now, right? Look at that date. Like, that's crucial. You can double up on what this payment is. If you just do a little bit of homework and find out what that date is.
Yep. And just for, for people listening to follow on the math, $50,000, 15% before, 15% after the anniversary date, that's 30%. 50,000, 30% is $15,000.
Right.
Right. So that penalty goes down from $50,000 to $35,000. And listen, $15,000, that's a lot of money in your pocket.
Right. And that's obviously, an extreme example, but even if the numbers are lower, it still makes a lot of sense if you could do that. And all you have to do is look at what that date is, right? And you as an agent might be doing good. You know what? It doesn't make sense for you to sell right now in your financial situation because you can't double up on your prepayment. You got 6 months to go. So when we're not going to sell it in January, let's wait till June. Let's wait till you can do that. Now, you as an agent, you're hungry. You want a commission in January, but you're not servicing your client properly. You might be better. So you know what? Let's do this in June. We'll have a good market in June. You get to prepay it. Your mortgage down more. It would make more sense to do it then. And now the client loves you, because you're not just a hungry agent looking for a commission. You're actually looking out for their best interests. At the end of the day, you're still going to get a sale. You're still going to get your commission. You're just going to not get it in January. You're going to wait till June because that's better for your client.
And you know what? Showing that you care and being that, advisory member of this person's team is going to lead to more referrals and more business down the line. Maybe, maybe you're not going to get that sale today, right? Because maybe you have that tough conversation. They check what the penalty is, and, maybe they need to wait 6 months. And you're just like, oh man, who knows what the market's going to be like 6 months from now. But what you've done is you've gained the trust and loyalty of this client. Right. And now they're sending their friends, they're sending their children, they're sending, their loved ones, they're sending the people that they care and trust about to you because they know that you're going to take care of them every step of the way and they trust you. And that is the biggest thing. It's part of your brand. It's part of your long-term business vision. And it's part of who you are at a very core level. And that's what people want. That's what's going to get you to that next level of success.
Right. And that's the sort of whole focus of this topic that we're on. It's how do I become better at doing my job? Because if I become better, I'm really doing it for my clients. Okay. They get the benefit of me becoming better, whether I'm a better lawyer or you're a better real estate agent or a better broker owner. They become the beneficiaries of that knowledge. You're going the extra mile. You're looking at the detail. You're giving them the proper explanations, and you're always doing it in their best interest, not in your best interest. Okay. And like you said, if you do that, you're going to make a client and you're going to get the referrals, and they're going to make your long-term goals are going to be achieved much faster by taking that approach to it. Not, oh, I need the fast kill. I need that commission in January, like that should never be the approach. So, another issue, just to move on a little bit, we find some agents getting in trouble with is in the dates that have to go into an agreement of purchase and sale. They really have to be mindful of those dates. And there's a few key dates that have to go in there. It starts with the irrevocable date just on agreement of purchase and sale, making sure that's dealt with properly and you get proper sign backs and things like that. You have to have, there's a date for when we can search title and do title requisitions. Those dates are really important. We've had agents that put a date that's already passed in agreement of purchase and sale, or give you one day to do a title search that can't be done in a day. There's a date put in, we don't receive the agreement for sale till 3 days after that date. Now, if we search title, we have no recourse back against the seller. So you got to be very careful with those dates. And then the closing date, you got to pick a realistic completion date, make sure that, people can meet it. For the most part, I get asked all the time, if we close this in 2 weeks, can you do that? Is that enough time for you to close a deal? My answer is always yes. Whether we're buying, we're selling, we can get it done, because it's usually not at our end that would hold it up. If I got to pay someone overtime because we're really up to full capacity to do it, I'll get someone to do it. But it's generally driven not by the lawyer's office; it's driven by the mortgage financing, and when can you actually get the loan, and how fast can they process that. So you got to be careful as an agent what you're committing your client to. Fast closing, but can we get it closed?
Right. You have to have clear communications with all the different professionals.
Right.
So your mortgage agent, right? Everybody needs to be on the same page, because just like you said, a lot of the delays happen from, things that you and I cannot control. Like we can't control how quickly a bank funds, or how quickly an underwriter, looks at a file, or how quickly, somebody from a higher level makes an exception on file and moves things forward. Like the mortgage agent can control those things to some extent, depending on the relationship they have. But remember, banks are huge, multi-level bureaucratic organizations that have been around for hundreds of years, and they have their own internal processes that they need to follow.
Yeah, and they've got certain limitations even imposed by COVID. Bank hours are shorter, their staff's working from home, their staff's getting sick too. Just like, you're experiencing your office, we're experiencing our office, banks have those issues too, people calling in because there's, they're getting sick and they're following protocols because somebody else they were exposed to got sick. There's a lot of factors in this now. So they got to be careful and make sure before you commit to a date that you can meet those dates. They also have to take care to make sure they're describing the proper legal description that goes into the document, whether there's easements or there aren't the easements, those things are important to know. If it's a condo, are there parking units, are there locker units, are they described properly, where are they? Attention to detail is really important, and you got to be careful with those things.
Yeah, and parking spaces are a big one on condo documents, right? Especially from a negotiation point of view. If you can get a condo certificate and see that there's 2 parking spaces with the unit, but the seller's only selling 1, a lot of the times it's a complete different conversation if you include the second unit ahead of the negotiation process than it is after you negotiate a price and then you want to add the second unit to the purchase price. And let me tell you, if a buyer finds out that there was a second parking spot that's owned by the seller, and then, subsequently they're forced to pay a higher fee for it, they're going to be really upset at the realtor that he didn't catch that at the beginning and include it in the actual negotiations. Because, a lot of the times, hey, I'm going to give you an extra $10,000 over and above what your expectation is going to be enough to get that second parking space. But once you agree to a price, you want to talk about that second parking space, you're going to be looking at completely different figures, right? Depending on where you are. Toronto, 40, 50, 60,000, right? When you go further out, Burlington, 25, 30,000. It really depends. A lot of the times, if you just say, hey, you have 2 parking spaces we want two. We need two parking spaces. Otherwise, we're not bringing you an offer. Completely different conversation at the beginning, having that conversation up front.
I'm always amazed that people that would buy a condo and never, they look at the unit, the dwelling unit, but they never went to look at the parking spaces to see where they are,
Happens
to see if they could fit their car in there, because they got to scrape past a pole to get it in there. And where's the locker? Where's the access locker? How big is it? How useful is it? And they never even look. And sometimes we've had clients that, there's two parking spaces that comes with this. That's great. Turns out it's a tandem parking unit. No one ever looked at it. No one ever went to see it. And they said, I don't want a tandem parking. It means every time my wife pulls out, I got to go and move my car so she could get her car. And for some people, that's great and they don't care. And they'd rather have the extra spot. And if that's what gives it to them, then fine. But to other people, that's a deal breaker, right? So why not go take a look at it?
I've been in one of those situations, David. And what I used to do is I used to have both sets of car keys in both cars. But let me tell you, it's not a fun situation to be in.
Yeah. Look, and underground parking in a condo isn't easy for some people. It's tough. You go look at any pole in underground parking, and they're just filled with scrapes. And you look at all the cars that park there. So you want to know where your parking spot and how easy it is to get in and out, and how close is that to an elevator if you're an elderly person. That's a critical issue for some people. If they have to. If they're right at the end of a parking garage and they got a long way to get to an elevator, that's really significant for somebody who's elderly or might have a handicap or something like that. So why not go take a look at it before you put an offer in? And at least rely on the agent should be looking at it and to tell you where it is and describe it to you, but someone should be looking, right?
Yeah. And David, it's one of those things that arguably you're going to come into contact with and interact and use every single day. Sometimes multiple times a day, right? So if you have a parking space that's, on a corner and far from the elevator and in a dark space in the garage, and there's a big fan that's blowing dust on your brand new Corvette, right? That should influence, what the spot is worth to you, what the condo is worth to you, and whether you want it or not. And I absolutely agree with you that realtors need to spend a little bit more time and protect their buyers.
Yeah. So another issue that comes up a lot of times is chattels and fixtures. Confusion over what's a chattel, what's a fixture, what's supposed to stay, what's not supposed to stay, because there's a standard clause. I know that you know it. I'm surprised that not all the agents deal with it properly. And there's a clause that says, the following chattels are included. And that's where you list chattels are movable things like washers, dryer, the appliances are generally in there, and anything else that you want included. If there's other furniture you want included, if you want the window coverings and the blinds included, make sure you put it in there so there's no ambiguity. Was it a fixture? Is it supposed to stay? Is it not supposed to stay? Which light fixtures, if there's particular value to the dining room chandelier and the seller wants to take that with them, then they got to make sure they're excluding that and specifically refer to it. But go the extra mile, do the extra little detail work. Don't just put fridge, stove, washer, dryer. Describe them in further detail, by serial number, by make, description, take pictures of it, video. Make sure you're getting the right ones included, okay? Make sure those weren't staged appliances that are not staying and they're going to be replaced by lousy appliances at the end of the day. You want to know which ones are actually included. There's a lot of value to that, right?
Yep. And you're doing a valuable service for your clients. And nobody ever thinks about these things until things go wrong in closing, right? Yep. But it's all about being proactive, and it's all about going that extra mile. And listen, if a client sees that you've documented everything, that you've done the work, and then the seller does something that's out of context, at least they're not blaming you for it, because you'll know that you did everything in your power to protect them, what you could have done.
Right. So if you're on the seller side and you got to have that discussion with the seller, what is it that you really want to take with you? what really has value? Can you use this in your next place? If not, you're just taking it with because you're going to throw it out later. Then what's the point? Just let them know you're going to leave that, and let them throw it out if they don't want it. But make it clear in your agreement what you want to take out and what you're leaving in. And it also has to be clear what's being put in there for staging purposes only, and not staging. Like if you change a whole bunch of light fixtures for staging purposes, the buyer is expecting those light fixtures to be there when you close. So you got to make sure it's clear that certain light fixtures are going to be changed, and there'll be another light fixture there, but not that. But you don't want to get into these disputes down the road, because the day before closing, the buyer went in for a viewing and saw that all the appliances have been changed, and all the light fixtures have been changed, and all the drapery is gone, and things like that. Those are things that blow up deals really late in the game.
Yeah, and you can't do anything about them, right? Like if you have a crystal chandelier in the dining room that the couple got from their parents as a wedding present, and it has huge sentimental value, right? If an offer comes in that's $300,000 over market value, and the buyer digs in their heel and says, "No, I need to have that chandelier," how are you going to look at your sellers and say, "Oh my God, we're in this catch-22 situation"?
Right.
Okay? It's your job as a professional never to get there, right? And when you sit down with them and have a conversation about, hey, what's staying, what's going, oh, that light chandelier has to go. Okay, let's take it down. Let's replace it with somebody else.
Right. Take it down so the buyers never see it.
Right. And
you're not. It's part of the negotiation.
And you're not putting your people in that situation where there could be that situation where the buyer digs their heels and says, "Hey, I need to have that chandelier. Like, I'm giving you an unbelievable offer. The one thing I'm asking for is that chandelier." And you're like, "Oh my God." Right.
Yep.
So, but if you have the right conversations, if you do the right work up front, don't put your sellers in that situation. It's your job as a professional to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's very easy ways of making sure it doesn't if you just, put the time and energy beforehand.
Yep. And then there's always issues that come up, with certain things. What's a fixture? What's not a fixture? With built-in TVs and speaker systems and things like that. What can you take out? What can't you take out? You got to give it all some thought in advance and make it really clear in your agreement of purchase sale what's going to go. Especially we're in those gray areas when it's, we just did one. It was over a $6 million sale, and they got top dollar for their sale and everything. And then my selling client was, can I take these speakers out? They're in the wall, and they're sort of in the wall. It was really gray whether they're fixtures or are they bolted in or they not, or they're removable. And he really wants these speakers, and the buyer is expecting the speakers to stay. It's part of the sound system and the TV system and everything. And I said, what are you going to do with these speakers if you take them out? And how much are they worth? Like, you want me to spend a couple $1,000s of my time negotiating whether you have the legal right to take these speakers out when it's really a gray area, and you're not even going to use them in the condo you're moving into. Like, what are you doing? You got $6 million for the sale. Like, don't get petty on this stuff. But it happens all the time.
It happens all the time, and these conversations are more important than ever, because it's never the big issues that blow up deals. It's always the small issues that could have been dealt with if you took the right steps before listing the property. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I'm sure you see it all the time. It's like sometimes, like, I can't believe they're fighting over the bar stools, right? But and listen, you have to keep your sellers and your buyers' emotions in check as a realtor. Don't add fuel to the fire. Don't let the conversation escalate, and never lose sight of the fact that you're here to close a transaction, and you got to work together.
Right. Another place, we find that there's ambiguity and the agents get in trouble on these is dealing with rental items, like furnaces, hot water tanks, filtration systems. Some are owned, some are rental. It's got to be made really clear in the agreement of purchase and sale whether it's a rental item and the buyer is going to assume the rental, whether it's a lease to own, is there a buyout that the seller has to, because if it wasn't listed as a rental, it's considered to be owned. The buyer's expecting ownership. So if the seller never finished paying for it because it was on a lease to own, there's a big lump sum that the seller's going to have to pay to buy that out. And and that's something, we talked about before, when sometimes there isn't enough money to close a transaction. That's another factor that comes in, because all of a sudden they got to pay, $10,000-$20,000 to finish paying off a furnace on a what was supposed to be a long-term lease to own. But they sold the property on the basis that there was no rental items and no assumption of a lease to own agreement. Buyer bought it on the basis that it was all owned equipment. So now sellers got to buy it, finish buying it to leave it there for the purchaser. Did they account for that? It could be a significant amount of money.
And look, home builders right now are pushing the boundaries on material cost, on profit, right? They're trying to find different ways and different avenues of cutting their expenses. And we're seeing on the new builds, especially, these compact units that do water heating and heating the house. And these are expensive units, and more
Yep.
and more often they're rentals, right?
Yep.
So you have to ask the right questions. You have to look, if you're selling a new complex or a newer complex and you see one of these units, look at past listings, right? Talk to your seller, get something in writing from them that they're not renting the furnace or the hot water boiler system, from anybody, and that they own it free and clear and they're not paying a monthly fee. You have to go the extra mile, and you have to be vigilant now more than ever before.
Yeah, and if you're on the buyer's side and these things are owned, okay, well, that's great. But you also wonder, like, how old are they and what's their useful life? Because if it was a rental hot water tank and it broke down, you call the rental company, they just bring another one, and you still pay the same monthly fee, and now you got a new hot water tank. If it's owned and it's on its last legs, you own it. When that breaks down after you own it for a couple months or a year, you got to replace it at your expense. You want to know that on the buyer side. Even in a condo, there's certain heat pumps and things like that might be owned by the unit owners. How old are they? When were they last replaced? Because they might be functioning at closing, but it could break down 2 months after closing, a year after closing, and you as a new owner are stuck with that replacement cost. So it's all useful information to have. Okay. Another thing I want to mention is, HST is always a factor on transactions. Used residential property, there is no HST payable on a closing. So you got to know the property. If it's a commercial mixed use property, there could be HST payable on some of it, but not the residential part. These are important things to know. Is this property going to be treated? It might be, you think it's a used property, but it might be a substantial rebuild and actually treated as a new property. So HST could be payable. So you got to take a look at it if there's been a major renovation to a property, because it could be treated as new. So, just another area that agents sometimes get a little bit in trouble because they're not putting their minds to that and just assuming, I generally work in the used residential market, HST isn't payable, so I don't worry about HST. But okay, but this happens to be a substantially renovated property. It might be treated by the government as new, and HST is payable. So know your property, have some basic understanding of HST. You're not sure, then you call me up, or you call somebody up, call you up. You can straighten them up as well. Either of us could do that. So those are important.
When I deal with HST, whenever you're representing the buyer, you want it to be in addition to, and whenever you're representing the buyer the other way, you want it to be included. And whenever you're representing the seller, you want it to be in addition to, right? Yeah. And then, really, you don't have to really know what rules come into effect. It's really the party that you're representing, and you're safeguarding your client. So again, seller, it's in addition to, and buyer is included in.
Right. And just try and have some general understanding whether HST should apply or not. Okay, if it's clearly a used residential property and there's been no substantial renovation, you don't really have to worry about it. That's a mistake you can afford to make.
Yes.
I have to pause for a minute.
Okay, all right, no problem. All right, on that note, we're going to wrap it up here. We're going to continue the conversation on the next podcast. I think we gave everybody like a lot of great tips. And again, my message for everybody is go and listen to some of the other podcasts, because we go a lot more in depth into a lot of the areas that we covered today. But we do see these pitfalls in the agreements of purchase and sales and how agents are constructing their transactions. So we thought it's really important that we touch on some of these, and we're going to finish off the list on the next podcast as well.
Yeah, we covered most of it, but we'll get back to a few other things. And everybody just, do your homework. Take stock of what you're doing, how you're doing things. That's sort of the real message here, whether you're an agent, a lawyer, or in any other industry. We all want to just raise the bar of our own professions. So let's get out there and let's get the year off the right way, and everybody stay safe. Lots going on out there. Stay safe.
This new virus is highly contagious. So at one point or another, I think everybody's going to deal with it on one level. And, take care of yourselves, eat healthy, exercise, lots of vitamins, and take care of your loved ones as well. Wishing you a very prosperous 2022. And David and I both look forward to spending a lot more time with all of you guys. So thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time for the conclusion. And next time, we're actually going to bring Sabia Ali, the broker of record for Sutton Summit Realty. And I can't wait for you guys to meet Sabia. She's a wonderful leader. And she's a big reason why Sutton Summit has enjoyed the success that we have over the last 18 months. So can't wait for you guys to meet her.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for that podcast with her. It'll be fabulous, and looking forward to Chevy and I and Clark Griswold. All of us are looking forward to that. And everybody have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome to David and David on Real Estate. Join us as we explore the ins and outs of the real estate market and dive deep to understand the issues affecting buyers, sellers, investors, and businesses. If you love real estate as much as we do, sit back, relax, and gain an insider's edge to the exciting world of real estate. David Gorski is a broker and the owner of Sutton Summit Realty, a powerhouse brokerage providing guidance to over 180 realtors. And David Korman is a partner at Kormans LLP, a respected law firm specializing in residential and commercial real estate transactions, with offices located in Toronto, Mississauga, and Markham.